I was talking to someone.
That's good. Number 6. I'm going.
They're expecting a 3rd in August. And in fact, you know where they rushed it? The north part, where he used to live.
Actually, if anybody would want to, just put it around maybe. These are neat buttons in support of the Okay, anybody who's with us? Ready?
Pretty woman yun,
Make us stay.
Of bahagi ka ng aking buhay. Ngayong araw na pa.
Okay, good morning ladies and gentlemen. And welcome to this supposedly almusalan puro. We are deeply honored by the presence of a member of the Provincial Parliament of Ontario who accepted to be with us as we confront the deplorable conditions of caregivers lured into Canada by unscrupulous agencies and recruiters. To us in the Filipino community, the importance of this problem is underscored by the figures. I don't know if my figures are right. That 15 to 20,000 Filipino caregivers enter Canada every year, aside from the estimate that there are about 30 to 40,000 others under the so-called live-in caregiver program scattered across Canada at any given year. And even as we speak to you today, a number of Filipino caregivers are in danger of suffering the same fate as that of the late Juana Tejada. Cecilia Magsibang, for one, is diagnosed with terminal stomach cancer. And another, a mother of 4, Madonna Galinato, is suffering from aneurysm. Both were deprived of OHIP coverage at the time they needed most. We also had the case of Maria Perey Limpiado, 38, a native of San Andres, Quezon, in the Philippines, who is suffering from ovarian cancer. Ability to work renders her candidate for deportation. And there's another who requested that she be not identified, that she be identified only as Anne, and who is suffering from breast cancer and undergoing radiation treatment. She was diagnosed with the disease in 2007. Although the immigration status of this 40-year-old woman has been under review since 2006 and approved in principle, her open permit expires on May 31, 2009, this year. But before I take so much of our time, I better ask Pay Arellano to introduce our guest.
Thank you very much, Tony. And I believe that our guest really doesn't need further introduction because he's all over the news these days. And in fact, he's becoming a byword in the community. The Filipino community itself having been the champion of caregivers lately with this Bill 160 that he's proposing, and I guess we can always, support him in that endeavor. But just so to mention to you some of his credentials, he has been a politician in Toronto, dating back in 1982, and at this time he is a member of the Ontario legislature in the provincial election. And I mean, that was when he won in the 1995 election. And just some highlights of what he has been doing in the legislature. He has actually championed the environmental causes, including the protection of the Oak Ridge moraine. And in 2005, he is also responsible for the Bill 124, which has to do with the recognition of foreign training professionals in Ontario. And aside from that, he was also responsible for dishing out millions in grants for settlement or anything to do with the multicultural community. So really, he is a friend of the multicultural community, and he has been working for the faceless people. And it is fortunate for us to have someone, an advocate for our causes, in the person of Mr. Mike Colle. Now, also, a little bit of his background in terms of the academe. He was educated in Carleton University. He worked as a teacher of history and economics for 18 years, including several years at Michael Powers High School and St. Michael's College in Toronto. And he was also chair of the Toronto Transit Commission from 1991 to 1994. And currently, he represents the riding of Eglinton Lawrence for the Ontario Liberal Party. And if you would note, that riding is where the concentration of caregivers is. And so it's really, really relevant that he's championing the causes of his constituents under that riding, although, of course, in the case of caregivers, their status is one cause of concerns for us. And indeed, this is an exciting times for all of us. The fact that there has been an expose and there has been a barrage of information with regard to the problem. It's a nagging problem for all of us because our strength really and the measure of our success in the community is really how the vulnerables fare in our community. So without further ado, I'd like to give you Mr. Michael Colle, our champion and our friend in the Liberal government.
My name is Salamat. Yes. It's a pleasure to be here this morning, and I really want to thank Faye for the gracious introduction, and Tony, and Tenny, and all the members of the executive of the Filipino press that are here, because this is something that I feel very strongly about, because this is more than an issue that confounds or confronts the Filipino community. Really, it's an issue for all Canadians and all the people of Ontario. I know people have looked upon this as the issue of the nannies, but I look upon it as bigger than that. It's really a human rights issue. It's a justice issue. It's a social justice issue. So that is something that I want to congratulate the Filipino community for really being the leaders in this fight. And I know that many caregivers and nannies come from the Filipino community, but what you've been advocating is justice for all foreign workers that are here in Canada. And they work picking fruit in Niagara, picking tomatoes in Leamington. They come here, they come from Mexico, they come from Jamaica, They come from all over the world to essentially make a few dollars, and they work very hard, and then they can get that money back home for their children that they leave behind, or for a mother, a father, relatives that are back in, whether it be back in Jamaica or back in the Philippines. That's why they work so hard, is because, and that's why they make the sacrifices. And that's the story that I'd like to tell my colleagues in the legislature, or as the public in general, is that this is not just a Filipino story, it's not just about nannies, it's about social justice. And in Ontario and in Canada, we have a country that is very much an upholder of laws and social justice, and I think we generally are. But sometimes we need to be awakened in terms of some of the things that are going on in our cities or in our neighborhoods that are not right, that are not just. And I know you are well aware of it in the Filipino press about what's been going on to caregivers, and you've been asking for help and attention, and you've done great work. But I don't think there's ever been a great response in listening by the general community. They sort of knew about it, but they never quite... There's a difference between listening and hearing sometimes, you know. So the public knew about what was going on, but they never really took it to heart. So in the recent month or so, I think the public at large has finally begun to hear and to listen truly to these examples of injustice. You know, you've heard about the young caregiver that was bitten 3 times by the dog. You know, horrific stories. You know, young girls being kept in the basement. You've heard those stories. Not too far from here, with their passports taken. I don't have to tell you. You know, their bank books taken, essentially treated like chattel, like property. And many of the caregivers, the victims of this abuse, because they were so, and the ones that I've talked to said, because they are so afraid to lose that job, that means they don't qualify for the 2 years of work, because that means they can't send money back home, they just quietly grin and bear it and say, listen, I have to suffer, because if I say something, I will lose my opportunity to stay in Canada, I will lose my opportunity to send money back home. So for my mother back home and my aunt back home and my children back home, I've got to just be quiet and take the abuse, because they know how much that money means to them back home. And that is, I think, one of the reasons why this has gone on and has sadly reached the proportions it has. So, and just to let you know that I was not born in Canada myself. I came here as an immigrant myself many, many years ago. I came and but I was very young, with my sister and my mother. We came from Italy, and I can remember even back when I came, my mother used to be a seamstress. She was a very good seamstress, so she worked on Spadina for I think 35 cents an hour. So. And, in that time, no one really defended the newcomers that worked. They would work 12 hours a day. Sometimes after working for 12 hours, they would walk home to save the 10 cents on the streetcar fare. So nobody ever, the newspapers or the general population never said anything. So, when I see the evidence of this mistreatment of innocent people for no good reason by abusive people, it's not something that is abstract, and especially in whether it's my own family background or whether it's the people I represent. I have a lot of caregivers that live in my riding on Marley, on Bathurst Street, the Assumption Church is in my writing. So it's something that I've seen firsthand, and so it's something that I care about, not so much politically, but it's really something that is, to me, is a matter of conscience that we have to do something. It's not a matter of politics, it's a matter of conscience. So that's why I was very happy when the Toronto Star really took up your fight to a different dimension, because you've been doing it in your own press. But, finally, and I've got to congratulate Del Brazo and Robert Gibbs, for taking that up. Because what they did is they became your voice. That's what they did. And I told the Filipino Consul General, I said, the Filipino government should recognize them with some kind of honor. Really, they should. And I hope that they undertake that. Because that was a real commitment made by the Toronto Stars, a real commitment made by those reporters. And that came out for a benefit, as I said, but it's not just a benefit for the Filipino community, it's a benefit for everybody. So I hope that the Filipino government does that. I hope they do. Because there's such a close attachment. And some of you, I should mention too, I had the good fortune with working with the Consul General a few years ago when the Leyte mudslide happened. And when I was Minister of Citizenship, we were able to donate some money to the Ontario government to build some homes for the victims of the mudslides. And I know, because a little bit of money goes so far there. I know they built, I saw the pictures, I worked with Ricky, with ANCAP. We did the beautiful little brick homes or cement homes that they... very nice little homes. So a little bit of money from Ontario built homes, and I was very glad to be part of that. So in this situation now in Ontario, we have got an opportunity, really. In every challenge, in every situation, there's an opportunity to do something good. And now I think, like never before, this is an incredible opportunity to do something good that will not only benefit people that are caught in the circumstances that you mentioned with the health situation, but it'll benefit people for years to come. And that's what the opportunity is. So we have an opportunity to do something that really is going to make life a lot safer and better and more just for a lot of people. Thousands, as you mentioned, the 40,000 are here, 15,000 are coming. So we can really, I think, use this as a great bridge to future benefit. And so what I did is, again, I've been in provincial parliament since 1995, so I have a pretty good idea of how it works and how government works. And like I always say, government wants to do good things. I don't care what party it is, I don't care if it's federal, provincial, or the city, they generally want to do good things. But what happens with government is, there's so much on their agenda. There's things, the economy, I don't have to tell you about that, what's happening with the economy. And Ford and General Motors is going down, and the banks and unemployment. So governments always have a lot on their plate, on their table. So the critical thing is to be strategic and intelligent enough to understand how you can get your cause on the government's agenda. How to get it on there strategically. If there are 1,000 people screaming 1,000 different things, it's not going to happen. There has to be a strategic approach that is thoughtful and doable and practical and reasonable. Then you approach government and you say, well, because everybody comes to government. I said, I've been at city government, I talk about problems. I was a TTC for 8 years, chairman of the TTC. All I would get all day long is, this bus is no good, the subway's no good, fixed. I say, listen, I have problems that can fill this room. All I want, though, once in a while, is you to come in my door with a solution. So I said, I don't want to hear you. If you're going to come to see me tomorrow, and you've got a problem, I got a room full. So I don't need one more problem. I need one solution. come to me if you've got an idea, if you've got a solution. I will look forward to meeting you. So that's the way I approach government. So in this situation here, we obviously had a horrendous problem that was exposed and that you are all aware about, you've been advocating for years. So rather than saying it's the federal government's fault, it's that minister or this person should be doing it, or the agencies or whatever, I said to myself, what is the solution to this? So I thought the best solution was for me to present my idea of what could fix it. So what I did is I put together what I thought was a solution, and that's a bill, a piece of legislation, which is now before the provincial legislature, called Bill 160, which in essence is, and you can, I'm sure you've got copies of it, it's a bill that came on Manitoba's legislation. Okay, that's what it is. And with changes for Ontario, but that's what this bill is. A very detailed proposal for solutions to the problem we've had. It's not going to solve every problem, but I think it's a very substantial step towards solution. So I said, everybody's talking about the problem every day. So I said, well, so I said to my government, I said to my colleagues, I said to the public, I said, I have something that might help. Would you please look at it? Would you please get behind me? Because I can't do this by myself, but if you get behind me, we can push the government, we can push my colleagues, we can push the public to get behind it. Because you can't separate the government from the public. Government doesn't do anything unless the public is there. And the public will not push unless they get an idea of where to push. So I said, if you want to do something, I said, at least here's my proposal. It's not perfect. It's not going to make everybody happy. But I said, at least I am telling my government, here's what should be done. So I told the minister, I told the premier, the Honourable Dalton McGuinty, I said, and you see, when we were doing this, and it was right in the middle of the most change in tax policy we've ever done in this province. As you know, in the last month we've introduced a new budget, which is in some ways controversial, in some ways it's very good. But anyways, the Premier was up to here with the budget, right? You know, it's a $105 billion budget. So just before he was announcing the budget, I was going to the Premier and I said, Premier, by the way, while you're thinking about the budget, I have this thing here. I said, I've got a problem, and we have a problem if we don't take care of dealing with this abuse that's taking place in my community, in all of our communities. We have an obligation to do something, and we should do something. The people are all telling me something should be done. It's just incredible, appalling what's happening. So I said, I know as busy as you are, Premier, and dealing with the General Motors bankruptcy and dealing with climate change and dealing with unemployment and dealing with the budget, I said, don't forget our caregivers here. I did that to some of my colleagues too, some of the cabinet ministers, and I got a pretty good indication. Oh, sorry, I better close this off. Right at the right time. Right? It's probably my wife. No. But anyways, I told them, and really the Premier said, let me look at it. And he said, I think we're going to have to do something. And I said, but by the way, Premier, I'm introducing this in the legislature because I want to put my solution forth because we can't afford to let this continue. So they said, fine. So I introduced the legislature for first reading. It's there. It's in the House, Bill 160, for first reading. But as my bill was being introduced, at the same time, many other members of my party and Minister Kathleen Wynne, and I talked to Minister Fonseca, and I said, listen, I know you're getting all kinds of advice and you've already got all kinds of obligations with other areas of the Ministry of Labour, but I said, please, let's do something on this. I think this is the right way to do it. I know you're busy, I know you've got this other legislation going on, but let's do something. And most of my colleagues in the Liberal caucus agreed. And I got an indication from the Premier that they wanted to do something. So as you know, what happened last Thursday? I asked the question of the minister in the House, and I said, what are we doing about this situation? And essentially his response, and I had talked to him earlier, said they were going to introduce legislation very similar to this, okay? So in other words, the government of Ontario, the cabinet minister, Peter Franz, they will be introducing a law essentially very similar to this in the very near future. So they have a concrete commitment that they will be doing this. Now it may be somewhat a little bit different because there are some technicalities here they have to look at, but in essence, it's a great victory. As the front page of the Toronto Star said with Pura, you saw her, and I think that's the message really, that the government has listened, the public has listened to you, and I said it's not just to me or to Pura, and the public has listened to your cry for help. So the government of Ontario has said very unequivocally they are going to be doing something very comprehensive on protecting caregivers from abuse and licensing the agencies, hopefully putting on an online registry, which I think is a great idea. So whether you're in Manila or Hong Kong or you're in Toronto, you can look on the online and see whether that company is legitimate or not, and whether they're licensed in Ontario to be an agent. So the registry, and then it'll be fines if you violate the code of conduct to make sure, and then you could be suspended off the list. So it's going to be a very positive transformation in, essentially as an industry. As you know, in 2001, under our good friend Mike Harris, he took away all these rules. Up until then, there were some protections there. So in 2001, they were all gone, and that's when the Wild West took place here. Everybody says, yahoo, let's go, we're going to make some money. And so you're going to see a return to regulation and registration in Ontario, which is the biggest province that deals with caregivers and foreign workers. So over the next few months and weeks, there'll be more information about the exact piece of legislation they'll be introducing. Then there will be public hearings, there'll be debate, there'll be roundtable meetings where they'll get more input from the the people that are very knowledgeable, from lawyers, from caseworkers, from advocates, to see if they can, and you should all be part of that, to get, again, with the solutions, because we know the problems, but how do we solve, because some of these problems are there because some very mischievous people found a way of getting in the back door. So we've got to find a way of closing that back door. So we've got to be smarter than the opportunist. So that's what will happen. So the input will be very important in suggesting to the government what's the best way to close the front door, or make the front door open and make sure they don't get in the back door. So that's what will happen. So as I was telling Faye, I said my suggestion is continue the awareness. Like I'm having a meeting with Father Ben at the Assumption Church tomorrow night, where we're going to give out my little buttons here, and we've been signing petitions. Just what that demonstrates, if you keep, and for now, by keep supporting Bill 160, you're demonstrating the support for the solution, and it's much better than the government is doing it, because I've done these bills before, and what my wish is always that the government will do it. Because the government then have all the resources of the government to do it in a very, very comprehensive way. So by the government of Ontario to get behind this initiative is a significant victory, as I said, for you. It is. And the details and the questions that you have, and that'll be all part of the process. But the fact is that the Premier of Ontario, I said, has told me specifically they're going to be doing this. The Minister has said specifically in the press that they are going to be, and in the legislature, so they are proceeding. And I know the Ministry of Labour is now in the midst of drawing up this legislation. Okay, they're going through the processes, because you've got to get it right. Because as I said, there will be lawyers for the agencies that are unscrupulous that will try and find ways. We're already thinking, because I know some of them are already calling around and saying, what are we going to do to stop this or do that? So they're already trying to work behind the scenes to You see, so that's why it has to be a strong piece of legislation. It has to have your support. You see, because good legislation means there's good popular support. Because some people will try and come and say, well, this is against privacy. Why are we protecting foreign workers? Why not Canadian workers? So you get all kinds of things that'll come up, okay? But you have to lead in getting popular support behind. It's really a much needed piece of legislative reform, really, on the side of justice. And I would encourage you, to the members of provincial parliament, the Premier's office, to encourage them to continue on this strong road. They need that. The more encouragement, the better the legislation will be. And it will be in a number of months. I'm not sure the exact timetable, but whether it's 1 month or 2 other months, do not be caught up in that because you want to get it done right. And already, they might be able to get some of this information out. There might be a hotline put up. There might be early investigations done. So the process has already started. In other words, the signal has already been given by the Government of Ontario. They're going to take this as a priority. So now, in the Ministry of Labour, which deals with, the 5 million people work in Ontario and their safety, so they're now going to have to take this on too. So they're already doing that. They're gearing up to do this. So we just have to give them support to do it. And it is, again, a significant positive thing out of this injustice that you've been part of. And I'm very happy to play a role as a catalyst in getting this thing moving in the right direction. That's what I saw my role as doing, because I thought it's the right thing to do. It was good for the people I represent in my own riding, but good for everybody who calls themselves a Canadian, and certainly good for the victims of abuse who are really defenseless, as you know, for the most part, are really unable to speak for themselves or advocate for themselves. So, and there are many other things that have to be done. And I'll give you one example, and that's going to be my last comment. As you know, I was telling Faye the interesting comment. Somebody came to see me yesterday and said, there's a lady right now who's in a coma. Okay, you know of her. So her employer wants to fire her. So, because the employer doesn't want to pay the taxes, you see, because on her behalf. And as you know, if you don't pay taxes, then you face deportation, because that's part of the 2-year agreement. So it is just impossible. So what can she do? And you see, and even in this case, the Ontario government can't do anything because the deportation is a federal issue, because she hasn't paid the tax. So there are a number of other issues. This legislation may not protect all of those situations, but that's why I also think fundamentally the caregivers program, Live-In Care, is a very good one. It's brought in a lot of wonderful, good Canadians into this country that have helped so many people. But in 18 years, the only thing that's been done to make the program better is they changed the name. Remember about yeah, that's all that's been done. So that caregiver Live-In Care needs a review. It needs to be strengthened to protect it from the exploitation that takes place. That's one thing that should be done. I can't do it, but it appears to me in my discussions I've had with many people is that that program needs to be strengthened and protected from the abusers, because they are taking full advantage of it. And to remove that threat of deportation, because in every case that always comes up. Well, if they speak out against the abuse, they might be deported. There's always the fear of deportation, and that's got to be removed. And that's something that the provincial government can't do, and that's another strong piece of change that has to take place. That intimidation of deportation is the one factor that causes a lot of, I think, the caregivers to be quiet and to take it, because they always have, or their employer or the agent says, well, I'm going to have you deported. If you don't do what I tell you, you will go back. So that is one change that I can, or the Premier of Ontario, Dalton, cannot do something about, that should be changed, and that I've seen as a a serious problem that has to be fixed, because unless you get rid of that threat, you're not going to be able to remove some of the root causes of this abuse, which is that threat of being sent back home. You know, when they so desperately want to send money back home and they want to stay here. So that's one thing that should be changed too. But in conclusion, thank you so much for all the work you've been doing, and the caring, the advocacy that you've all been doing, and there's been so many people doing it. And it's very important to, I saw one newspaper today at the grocery store in Eglinton that said caregiver power, or I don't know which paper it was, but it's celebrate the victory. It is the beginning of a victory. It really is. Because on victory, on accomplishments, you build more strength, you build more willingness to continue the fight. Because if you're always fighting, and you don't have something you can say, hey, we did this. But and that's what I think it is, and that's why I know the meeting we're having tomorrow night at the Assumption Church with Father Ben, we are going to celebrate an accomplishment. We're going to say thank you, and we're going to say great that we've at least taken this good step. So to give us strength to keep fighting for the future. It's very important to do that, to build more, I think, you might say, will to keep up the good work. So again, I want to thank you for listening, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here this morning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Colle. And speaking of support, by the way, I would ask my colleagues here to please don't leave this room or this place without signing the petition. We still have some more petitions here to be signed, all right? So now we will open the floor for questions. Yes, Ricky?
Yeah, thank you, Faye. I do have a copy of the petition as well, so I thought I'd pass this around.
Do we have a mic? Yeah, okay, sure.
My voice is loud enough. Well, firstly, we definitely would like to commend Mr. Colle here for taking the initiative of introducing Bill 160 in the provincial legislature. And I told him earlier when I sort of welcomed him to come up to Aristocrat, I said that this is really long overdue, because my understanding is that Ontario is like following the lead of Manitoba and other provinces in terms of similar legislation. I don't know if I can say this at this point in time. I understand there will be future more public forums on the subject. But I actually went over the entire draft of the bill, and I've made a few notes here. I'd like to draw your attention, Mr. Colle, to the section on the recovery of no recovery from foreign worker. I understand in some instances employers, try to recover some of the costs, and there is one exception that is mentioned in your proposed bill. It has something to do with, and I'd like to read the pertinent section. An employer may sue to recover the employer's reasonable costs of recruiting a foreign worker from that worker if he or she fails to report for work, or having reported A, acts in a manner that is not condoned by the employer, and that I constitutes willful misconduct, disobedience, or willful neglect of duty, is violent in the workplace, or is dishonest in the course of employment, or fails to complete substantially all of his or her term of employment with the employer. I was wondering if it is necessary to insert a line. In this section, he seems to put place the onus on the worker, on the caregiver. But what about the onus of maintaining and ensuring that Ontario labor standards are respected and are observed by the employer? That the Ontario Human Rights Code is also respected and observed by the employer. So in other words, we're always saying at the back of our minds that the worker might be violative of this and that, or it's going to be violent, it's going to be dishonest. What about those instances where this is where perhaps a case where a worker might be deemed to have violated something? But so I was hoping that maybe a line could be inserted so that employers will also be reminded that they do have the responsibility as well to observe the Ontario Labor Standards and the Ontario Human Rights Code.
Yeah, in fact, right now as we stand, the foreign workers are protected by the Ontario Labor Standards and are protected under the Ontario Human Rights Code. The problem is that there isn't a mechanism or a place that can entertain these complaints right now. It's very obscure and difficult for a caregiver to access and to make those complaints. And that's why, by the Ministry of Labor undertaking a more proactive role in protecting foreign workers and caregivers, they will then have, I'm sure, a special division or unit or undertaking within that ministry that will do education, outreach, and resource support to caregivers so that they won't be intimidated on filing or reporting or going through the processes that they really have in many cases, and that some could be reinforced with this law. So that's why I've always said we need some strong legislation so that the ministry then undertakes this more proactive role, because the normal rules of engagement for the Ministry of Labor, for me or you, are not really going to help the vulnerable, fragile foreign worker. See, and that's why what I've said is we need a standalone legislation to emphasize the fact is, yes, we have a lot of great laws in this country, a lot of protections and rules, but the reality is, will that foreign worker who's afraid of being deported come and report abuse by a worker or wages being withdrawn, you know, working 60 hours, whatever it is? They're not going to do it. So that's why there's going to have to be new sensitivities and protections built into the way the Ministry of Labor operates. So, and that's why some people say, well, they've already got those rules. And I say, well, the rules are there, but the rules are very difficult for them to access. So this is, by doing this legislation and by the Ministry of Labor taking this on, there will be this new door for them to go to, and outreach to be taken for them, which isn't there right now. That's why it doesn't happen.
Okay, next question.
Any question from the floor? Yes.
Please come, you can come closer. Identify yourself.
Hi, my name is Imelda Cesara. I was just wondering if the caregivers who are local, are they under different rules from the foreign caregivers who come in? Because I know there are local caregivers who are Canadians. Are they under a different standard?
Actually, you know, with labor standards and human rights protection, they are basically the same. But the problem arises when foreign caregivers, which this law deals with, are more vulnerable, because usually what happens is they not only interplay with the employer, they're interplaying with the agent or agencies. So there's almost a third party which almost accentuates sometimes the abuses of the foreign worker. So that's why this legislation not only deals with the protection of the caregiver, but deals with the licensing and registration of the recruiter. Because a lot of the abuse starts with the recruiter with this unethical practices. But what I'm sure will happen as a result of this initiative right now, there may be opportunities to afford further protections to caregivers in general, you're saying, right? Yeah. And that's why in the legislation, I did it a bit different than Manitoba's. I call it the Caregiver Protection Act, also with caregivers, rather than just foreign workers. Okay, so, and I can't say for sure what additional measures will be put in the law that will protect caregivers in general, but by doing this, we're at least highlighting the vulnerability they're in too. And maybe more will be done as a result of this approach. But I can't give the specifics on that. But as you said, I'm sure you're trying to tell me, it's just a lot of similar abuses because there's nowhere to go for protection.
Okay, so but you're trying to do it for both local and foreign caregivers.
Yeah, but I say the initial intent, the main thrust of this bill is for the foreign worker caregivers. But some of these initiatives now, that means the Ministry of Labor will be taking a more proactive role in advocating on behalf of caregivers, will result in more protections for caregivers in general. But I can't give you the details of that until we see what the government's detailed intentions are.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Yes.
Simple question. How do we get our name and email address to every session of the hearing? Let's say there will be public hearing. How do we know the dates, time?
Yeah, what to do. That the public hearings will be published in the media. It will be on the channel, the legislative channel, and then if you leave your name and contact in my office, we'll also send it out to you, all the information we get. I have no problem doing that.
Yeah, okay.
But there'll be by law, when they do any hearings to deal with legislation, they have to publish them in at least 3 newspapers, and they have to publish them on the television station. And plus, as I said, any member of provincial parliament can get that very quickly to you in advance.
Yeah, but there's so many laws. We want to be...
Oh, I know. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what I do in my office. I usually have a number of interested parties. They're interested in different legislation. So we keep them on an email list, and we give them updates. So with this, I've already started to acquire quite a list. So I send out regular email blasts and say, here's the latest. Here's what's happening. There's a meeting tonight, or there'll be legislative hearings, and I'll make sure you're on it by just letting me know, okay?
Also, if we need to attend the parliamentary hearing, is there like in Ottawa there's a foyer that we can listen to the live debate?
Sure.
And how do we get? Do we need to register first to get it? Because every time I go to the parliament, I have to have my name first to the security guard, right?
Yeah, well, what you have to tell them what you're there for. You can just go through my office and say that you're going to visit that day, and we'll get you a pass.
Yeah.
And you can come in. You can sit in the visitors gallery, or you can sit upstairs. Or if you're part of the press, there's a press gallery that's up there too. It's just the problem with it is you've got to make sure you're there for the right time, because sometimes you may go at a certain time, and the debate may not start for 3 or 4 hours on that issue. It changes quite often. But anyways, just let my office know, and we'll keep you informed. And just call. And if you don't want to email, just call my office. We can give you a pretty good update on what the progress is.
Okay, in addition to this question, if the community would want an input in that by way of position paper, how can we do that?
The thing that I would do is that there will probably be 2 phases. There'll be, I think there'll be some stakeholder meetings held by the ministry at the beginning. They'll go and talk to various legal groups. They'll go and talk to professional groups. They'll talk to advocacy groups to try and get some input. And then once they write the legislation, then there will be also public hearings where you can make deputations. And that's when the position papers can also be... So there's 2 opportunities. At the very beginning, when there's stakeholder meetings and roundtables, and then when there are official public hearings, which will be held, I'm sure, in Toronto for the most part. And you can give written deputations and make an oral deputation. And the best thing is to organize. If you've got 10 people that agree on a certain presentation, put it under the name of the association, under the name of an advocacy group, and have one spokesperson give that deputation. And they take written deputations plus oral deputations. You can do either one.
Can we count on your office to at least give us the dates that,
sure.
that are really key to these deputations or this consultation?
Yeah, that we do that all the time. No problem.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions from the floor?
Yeah, and if you have any other questions, because this is something that's very complicated for the average citizen, is the legislative process and the details. And if you have any questions, or someone raises an issue that... And there's really no question that's, out of sorts. Just ask my office and we can inform you, because sometimes, like yesterday, some people were emailed me, says, "Oh, your bill is passed, great." I said, no, not quite. I said, it was, you know, the beginning, but, so I can just explain those things because sometimes people get ahead of it. But, oh boy, I'm still getting calls. Okay, anyways, let's see. Just I'm going to take this just to see, because I know I have another event I'm going to. Hello? Yeah. Okay, I'll be there in a half hour. Okay, so I'll be there in a half hour. Yeah, we have a very good program. I just mentioned that to you if you want to know that. The police of Toronto have a program where if young people want to do a workshop on computers, if they want to work on computers, they do a 5-hour workshop or a 4-hour workshop, and at the end of the workshop, they give away 20 computers, Pentium 4s. This is done with Reboot Canada and with the Toronto Police. So we're doing one here down on Lauderdale and Caledonia here, and it's very good. And then you can buy Pentium 3s that are refurbished. They're very good for $60 for other students. So it's because some youth can't afford to buy the computers, so if they sign up for the 5-hour program, there's going to be 20 young people who are going to get a very nice computer for 5 hours. And so it's with a good company and the Toronto Police Services. So we're just doing one down here in Caledonia later. So,
Okay. Thank you.
sure.
Yes, yeah.
It's okay.
Anyway, I'm just very so at the moment you cannot say we cannot declare victory yet until the thing has been passed, isn't it?
Right.
So when will that take place?
Well, it'll be over the next number of months. It could be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months. It might take. Some laws take 2 or 3 years, but I think this one will go fairly fast, and that's why it's so important. I don't think there's nothing wrong. That's why I sort of like the Toronto Star's interpretation of it, because it was a victory. It was quite a victory to get a government as large as Ontario to say that's going to take this on. That's quite an accomplishment, and that they're going to do something. But on the other hand, there are other situations that will take place with the law, and then the specifics, and then the first reading, second reading, debate, hearings, all the way along, and you go through the process. And sometimes it's much slower than you think. But remember, every paragraph in here, like Ricky just mentioned one paragraph. You see, we could, if I get 3 lawyers from the government and 3 lawyers from other places, we could talk about that for a whole day. See, that's what happens. So you have to be patient in that regard to get it done right. Because if you don't do it right, then it'll be challenged in the courts. Then it won't be effective. So there has to be some true judicial deliberation done on different parts of the bill and to do it thoroughly. And so over the next number of months, but what you can do in the meantime, though, is, I think what I was telling Faye, is by still supporting the initiative that I had with Bill 160, continue to do petitions, demonstrate the support for action, and that keeps the momentum so that the thing keeps moving down the track.
So how about the complaints that's being filed, and will the action done?
Well, I'm not totally sure of that, but I know the ministry said they were going to start to do some preliminary things. But I'll let you know more about that. I'll let them speak to that. But I know my discussions with them, they said there might be some things they could do in the interim just to deal with some of these issues, but not the legislation yet. So, but I don't know exactly. They may be announcing that, but I don't know what the details are there yet.
So if the legislation is passed, you have to get the approval of the lieutenant governor?
But that's just a rubber stamp.
Oh, that's rubber stamp. So it can happen like
Yeah, it goes.
day after?
Yeah, it goes first reading, which is just the introduction. Then there's second reading debate, which goes on for could go on for a couple of weeks. And then there's public hearings that could go on for another couple of weeks. And then there's the drawing up of detailed regulation, line by lawyers and lawyers and lawyers and lawyers. And then the bill is passed after third reading. There could be third reading debate, which there probably would be. And then it's passed, and then the and then you get the government proclaims it, then the Lieutenant Governor has to stamp it. So it goes through steps.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah,
June.
but anyway, we were mentioning about sick caregivers right now, and somehow they're being old. Is there anything that we can do about it? Is there hasn't been anything decided about it?
Yeah, I was telling Faye there's been some minor change that she's aware of that they've undertaken with the OHIP situation. I've tried to get, because it's a fairly complicated issue, I can't really answer that in a 100% way myself, but I'm going to be doing some more investigation. Because, you know, Father Ben told me about the couple of the women that he's supporting through donations down at his church. So I'm doing some investigation on that, see what can be done in that area, and the vulnerability of people who didn't have the 3-month coverage and etc. and they're not able to work. So I'm doing some investigation on that and see if I can get some answers for you. But right now I don't have the real. I don't know enough about it because OHIP issues get very, very difficult. And but it's something that I know we had talked to Minister Smitherman about earlier. But it's something I'm undertaking to see if I can find out what we can do to help.
Okay.
So maybe we can work it within your guidelines, right, to put them together as one piece of action.
Yeah, if you think, you see, that's what it is. If there's a way of resolving this, the OHIP medical coverage issue, you know, we got to find a way of dealing with it. Because I myself don't have the expertise right now, knowing the intricacies of OHIP and the related issues. So, but suggestions on what might be done to deal with these, because they're sort of caught in limbo, you know, in between and betwixt, and then as a result, then they can't work. Then because they can't work, they can't fulfill the requirements, and then you know, so it's a real dilemma. But I'd be more than happy to see if I could bring those forward and have the Minister of Health or other ministers look at that and see if we can deal with that, because you know, you begin to appreciate, you know, like the cost of medical coverage and the situation that can occur when you're sick and can't work and you're not covered.
Okay, one question, last question, or you're having a question, Marlene?
No, that was the same question.
Okay, so one last question from the floor and we will wrap up.
I feel that the bill has already passed from the front page of the Star yesterday. It was really bravo. I feel joy in my heart, really, and we thank you for that.
No, and I think that's very important to feel that, because it's not wrong. Although technically we still have to go through more work.
Yes,
but it's good to
but
it's good to give that message of joy to people.
I am so happy yesterday that I had to go to the resource center where the congregation of all nannies were there, about 25 of them. I'm going to distribute that and maybe give me a paper for the time. And they're all very happy.
Yeah, no, and it's good to.
Very happy too.
And just tell people that we still have work to do. We're still going to work, but at least we've climbed a big mountain. Yeah, and that hope is powerful. That's very powerful.
I guess
can we assume that the Liberal government is behind all these things, going to support this bill?
Well, they've already indicated they are. Yeah, so that's right. The announcement Thursday.
So, being the majority, it's like a done deal.
Well, you never say it's a done deal, but once it's a very serious indication from the Government of Ontario that they are going to do this, and so that's quite an achievement to have that turnaround happen.
And if we can just get the Honorable Mr. Colle to commit that to keep us abreast with the legislation. If there are pieces of literature or document that we can go over as a community, that would be most appreciated, because we feel that there are those places in which the community's input really has to be in, just so it could make more meaningful relevance to us.
Yeah, and I think that's important, to get the right information out, or the clarification, because these are, I mean, never mind newcomers who have trouble with language or so forth, the community at large has very little idea how the legislative process works. You know, they have, there's no difference, so more happy to do that. But the main thing is that the big picture things are important to give people that hope, and to keep working at it, and to keep being positive, and it's not going to solve everything. And again, there's so many different things, and don't. The other thing that happens sometimes with bills is groups come along in good faith, really. They say, well, why don't you put this in too? Or why don't you put this in too? And if that happens, it just slows the process down, and it may not be the appropriate thing to do. So have to be, and sometimes one suggestion from a group, they might be very unhappy. But you cannot make 100% of the people happy in bills, because I did this bill with the Recognition of Foreign Trained Professionals, Bill 124. And it took a lot of work to get agreement, because everybody said we should do this, and then do this, and then, like someone phoned me and said, the thing I don't like about the bill is the fine is too small. And I said, well, right now there's 0. Right now you can't find the person to fine. And the other thing is, just remember, you can have a huge fine, but judges never like to impose huge fines because they want the discretion. So I could say $1 million, and it looks good, but it's never going to be implemented. So those are kinds of things that are normal. Some lady phoned me and said, now you're going to make my nannies more expensive. I don't like your bill. I said, well, explain that to me. Well, she was worried that now that she doesn't have to pay because there's the government is involved, the government gets involved, it's going to get more expensive. I said, yes, but don't you want to make sure that the nanny you have is protected? Don't you want to make sure that the person you dealt with as an agent is legitimate, that he's not taking money from this poor person? Wouldn't your conscience feel a lot better whether you're going to get a discount worker or something? So some people will have some weird ideas about what we have to do, and then some people will complain, oh, the government's going to come to my house to inspect whether I'm nice to my nanny or not. So, the government doesn't want to do that. It's basically by setting, we have no rules right now, folks. No rules. It's basically a free-for-all. Anybody can do